right, Sara Sery, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I was excited to be able to connect with you because one of our staff members who actually lives in Portland, the Portland area, kind of had a neat connection with you through a different ministry, and somehow your name landed in my on my desk, and he said, "Hey, I think this would be a good guest on the podcast." And so I said, "Sure." So I reached out, and I'm glad we were able to make the connection.
Yeah, me too.
So we're going to be talking today, as we do often and almost always on this program, about the topic of sex and relationships, and we're going to be talking about it really kind of in the context of family. So why don't you tell our listeners just kind of how you got into this space of what you're doing with coaching and really with what you're doing, a lot of ministry, it seems like, with moms. Can you talk about that?
Yes, yeah. So my ministry is with moms. It's called Bad Christian Moms, which I like the connection with Be Broken. I think we might have a similar undercurrent there. I started this ministry coaching moms, and originally I was doing 6 months of kind of an intensive coaching program with my clients, and it was a lot of work on managing your mind, paying attention to your emotions, digging into your vocation, dealing with guilt and shame, kind of some of those basic things, all sort of related to being a mom, raising kids, being a wife, all of that, and exploring how does the gospel apply to all of the brokenness that I find in myself now that I'm a mom. And after I started, within a year, I think, of starting it, though, I realized that there was also a really big need to talk more about marriage, more about sex, more about sexuality, and talking with kids about sex. And so I ended up expanding my main program to a year so that there was more time to build the foundation and then also explore some of these other topics, while also applying that foundational stuff of taking your thoughts captive and being responsible with your emotions and all that. So, yeah.
So what was that like even for you in terms of a personal journey? Because it's one thing to kind of get into a space and start to try to minister to others and try to help them, but I'm always curious what motivates someone to get into this particular kind of space of ministry where you're willing to openly talk about sexual topics and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, so it's kind of like there's two pieces, why I started the coaching program and then why I also wanted to talk about sex, and they're definitely connected. I really like talking about things that nobody else wants to talk about. And I like, when I first became a mom, or before I became a mom, like I thought I was going to be really good at it. I was getting a master's in counseling. I was, like master's level parenting classes and learning about emotional intelligence, and just really thought, I'm going to be so good at this. My kids are going to be so emotionally intelligent. And then I became a mom, and it was so hard. And, so much came out of me in terms of anger and resentment and bitterness and boredom. Like there was just so much coming out of me that I was not expecting to have to learn about myself, and see in myself, and really almost seeing myself anew as a sinner. And then thankfully through my church, like seeing how the gospel applies to that here and now, in the shame I feel here and now, in the rage I just displayed towards my poor family here and now, like the gospel applies to me now. So it was kind of this, like, sort of reawaken the joy of my salvation, really, getting to apply the gospel to the brokenness in my motherhood. And then I would say, like, parallel to that, I have always like wondered, what does a healthy, good sex life look like in marriage? Like, I know my husband and I, like, it's been one of the things we have fought about from the beginning. Sex and cleaning. Those are the things we fight about the most. They always have been, and they always probably will be. And I have always wanted to talk more with people about, like, what does a good sex life in a marriage look like? How do you talk about it? Especially differing sex drives or differing pasts, brokenness. What does it look like for it to be good? And so then getting to lead my clients into that discussion has been really fun and exciting for me because it's forced me to do more research and really, discover all these other ministries that I did not know existed, like Be Broken. And it's really been a fun like journey of learning for me too, finding all these resources and then getting to share those with my clients and discuss that stuff together. So
Yeah, that's great. So now I think, for most parents, they love their kids. They want the best for their kids, right? They especially for those of us who come from a Christian worldview, we're given that admonishment to train our kids up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. We want to give them that foundation. And so I think a lot of parents then, when it comes to the topic of sex, say, okay, what are the resources that I need in order to basically, quote unquote, teach my kids how to understand this topic or how to deal with it? How important, though, is it that these parents take an honest look and assessment of their own brokenness, their own misunderstandings, their own confusion around what a biblical sexual ethic means? How important is that, and how would you address that with the moms that are out there wanting to know how to help their kids, but they need to look in the mirror first?
totally. Yeah. I mean, I think it's not just that it's important, but it's actually the best way to do it, the most authentic way to do it, even the funnest way to do it, because exploring your own brokenness as a Christian, it doesn't have to be this like shame-ridden, like shame. It doesn't have to just send you to shame and bury you there. It can just lead you to the gospel and rejoicing in what Christ has done for you. And I think that actually is one of the best moments and opportunities to share the gospel with our kids is through our own stories of brokenness. Just working with my clients, I always tell them like, it's right after you lose your temper and you come back to your kids to apologize to them for that because you shouldn't have done it. That's a wonderful time to share the gospel with them and rejoice and invite them into your rejoicing that your sin has been forgiven. And so I think the same thing with talking about sex and sexuality with your kids is like sort of accepting that about yourself. Like, my sexuality isn't it's not even just that my sexuality isn't perfect. My sexuality is all jacked up, like, because I am, as a sinner, I am just all turned in on myself. And that includes my sexuality. I am just all curved in on myself. And that's displayed in my sexuality too. But Jesus Christ, he has given me his own righteousness, and that includes like sexual righteousness. So when the Father sees me, he sees that. He sees sexual righteousness, which is weird to think about. But I think but that's just such a joyful place to be talking about sex with your kids, that, and it sets them up too, I think, because, it's like my goal as a mom is not actually to make my kids be good. My goal as a mom isn't to make sure my kids are sexually pure. Like, that's not my main goal as a mom. My main goal as a mom is that my kids will know where to go with their sin, that they will know that Jesus is the friend of sinners, that they will understand the gospel, that they are a sinner, but that Jesus has paid for it all. And he doesn't want anything to stand between him and them anymore. Not their sin, not their shame, not their anything at all. Like, he's done it all. And yeah, so I think shifting the focus from I got to do all these things and check these boxes and have these conversations so that my kids will be sexually pure. Like, they cannot be sexually pure apart from Jesus Christ. Like, they have to have purity given to them as a gift of, his grace and righteousness. So,
Now, how does it look practically then for a mom or just even a parent to be navigating these things simultaneously, to be navigating both what they need to deal with in their own lives regarding their own brokenness and their own journey, while their fast-growing kids are in their home? How would you coach a mom in particular who's saying, "Oh my goodness, I just realized when I wanted to, you know, uh, start having conversations with my little toddler about body parts and being honest and open about these things, that man, it just triggered some old trauma memories in me, and I just realized how do I deal with those things simultaneously? How do I continue to be healthy and present for my child and try to help them grow up, and also at the same time deal with maybe things that are in my past that I've never really totally uncovered or dealt with."
Yeah, I mean that's like a really great heads up, just what you said, that as you start teaching your kids, stuff might come up for you. So having a place to talk that through, a safe place to talk about that. If it's trauma, then counseling is great for that. Or, coaching, or even like good, really good friends and Bible studies and stuff like that. Depending on the people, it really depends on the community. But just knowing that like you'll need a place to probably process that and talk about that and get really good feedback on that. But I think it can also it can be just a really like a natural journey to sort of take as a family, like as the parents are learning more about their own biblical sexual ethic, and then seeing how they can bring that up with their kids. So over the last year, it's obvious, it's been a big topic on my mind. I've been learning a lot more about it and thinking a lot more about it. And so I'm looking for opportunities, because I have three sons, and 7, 9, and 12. And they're never gonna talk to me about it. I know some kids ask a lot of questions. My kids don't. They're not that curious about it, and they're not going to be asking me questions about it. And so I'm looking for the opportunities to talk to them about it in age appropriate moments and age appropriate language. And so, with my youngest, who's 7, a lot of it is just God created us male and female. Isn't that cool? If something comes up about a boy or a girl, or, it's actually, comes up more and more with certain cultural things going on. But actually God made us male and female, and that's a good thing. It reflects something about him, that he is 3 persons, and he's both the same in those persons, but he's also different in those persons, and getting to talk more about some of the theological implications of our sexuality, and we can get more in depth with that the older our kids get. But
Yeah, so let's define some terms. So both you and I have said the phrase biblical sexual ethic. How would you succinctly, which may be difficult, try to define that or describe that to someone, recognizing that obviously we can't go into the entire unpacking of what that means. I mean, there's a lot in that. But if you were to simply try to tell somebody what you mean when you say biblical sexual ethic, how would you describe that for someone?
yeah, so I mean, the phrase is just basically what the Bible says about sex and sexuality. And okay, so to succinctly describe my biblical sexual ethic, well, he created sex to be in a covenant relationship between a man and a woman. This committed, lifelong covenant relationship is where sex should happen, and it in part reflects. Or somehow, and it, is kind of a mind-blowing thing, but somehow that relationship, including the sexual part of it, reflects Christ in the church. I think probably mostly through in the vulnerability and in the pleasure and in the intimacy and the closeness, the knowing and being known. That is a reflection of Christ in the church, and the relationship between Christ and the church, that it is vulnerable, it is full of joy, and we are known. And he wants us to know him intimately, closely. But, we have screwed everything up, and including our sexuality. So we are all sexually broken. And it's nobody's exempt from that. So Jesus Christ was the only one who lived a sexually perfect life. But he lived that life on our behalf so that he could give us his own righteousness, so that nothing would stand between us and the Father anymore. The curtain has been like torn in half, and now we get to enjoy, we are like caught up in his life with him. So we live his life vicariously through him, and that includes his sexual rightness. So we get to, so now as believers, and this is kind of where I get a little like excited, is like we don't have to wallow in shame. We don't have to like feel like a drudgery in our sanctification. We can like joyfully grow and move towards sexual wholeness and reach out for more of what is good and more of what he, the fruits of the Spirit and living life in the Spirit and all of that. We can reach out for more of that in like a playful, joyful journey. It doesn't have to be this like, shame-filled drudgery. I just got to make myself, be a better person. It's like, no, it doesn't matter about me and, whether or not I'm a good Christian or not. Like he is my goodness. He has given me that righteousness, and now I just get to grow with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of what I'm hearing you say is because I'm also thinking of, the person that's listening who is single. And I know we're talking about families. I know we're talking about parents, and we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about how we have some of these conversations with our kids. But I'm also hearing what you're saying in that overarching, beautiful understanding of God's design of even our bodies and sexuality and how it is a picture of the gospel, is that even for the single person, the idea of sexual longing is put in there ultimately to point us to God. Now, some people think that's totally weird, right? Wait a second, my sexual longing is only about connecting with another person, right? No, it's actually, I love the fact that God has given us that picture of marriage, but actually what he's put in us is meant to actually draw us beyond the picture, that it's really about what you're talking about, that deep intimacy. Now, let's talk about how, because you've got kids kind of in those middle years. What does it look like for a mom to take this amazing, big, huge, beautiful idea and start to deliver it to your children at various ages and stages of their lives? What does that look like? Can you unpack that for us a little bit and maybe provide some encouragement and maybe even some practical ideas for the moms out there that are saying, I've got a 7-year-old or I've got a 17-year-old, and how does this beautiful story get communicated throughout their growing up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to really like get into the story yourself. I mean, it's captivating, really, and I of course have heard, they shall become one, leave their father and mother, and become one flesh, and it's like I had heard that a million times, but it wasn't until recently that I was like, wait, like, learning more about what that really means. That we're talking about like ecstasy, like we're talking about pleasure and ecstasy and knowing and vulnerability and like really being known. Like Jesus said, let them, what did he say in that prayer to the Father? Let them be one as you and I are one. Mm-hmm. Like he wants oneness with us. And so really getting into that story, letting yourself be captivated by that in a way where it's you're just going to kind of bubble over, and also give you more of that language of, not only Christ and the church, but the Trinity too, that he's three separate persons, living in oneness. And then we get caught up in that oneness with him, and, and your parents' marriage, so if I was talking to my kids, like, our marriage is like a reflection of that, a reflection of Christ and the church, and also kind of a reflection of the Trinity, like three different persons existing together as one. Let's see. So I'm trying to think of like more specific stuff for talking to kids. So like I said, with my youngest, it's definitely, he's more interested in bodies. And so talking more about like gender and, you're a boy and I'm a girl, and isn't that cool? Like, and that is a reflection of, like I said, those two different things coming together, and becoming one is a reflection of God.
Well, and I think, I think it's probably harder for parents to think in terms of, yeah, how do I actually communicate this beautiful story? Because the reality is one, a lot of them don't know the beautiful story. And two is, like you said, maybe they haven't entered in themselves into really experiencing and understanding that story. So typically what I think most parents are looking for a lot of times when they are wanting to talk about the topic of sex is a problem has risen up, or a fear has risen up because of they see things going on in the culture. Pornography is looming in their home somehow. So can you talk a little bit now about the challenges to this story and this message that are common in our homes, even as Christians, and how do you address those with this gospel message related to sexuality?
Yeah.
So let's take porn first of all. That's probably one of the most common challenges in our culture that parents are going to face with their kids is the whole issue of pornography.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit jaded, but I think I'm sure you know the statistics of like how many men in church actually look at porn. It's
Right.
like, so I think but because I think that can be juxtaposed, like the reality of that can kind of be juxtaposed with this, sort of a mom being shocked, like, oh, and just devastated that their kid, is looking at. Not that it's not a devastating thing. I don't want to minimize that. But I guess I just see everything as like an opportunity for the gospel. Like, yes, your heart, like, wants to just serve itself. Like, that's who we are. Like, we're selfish. We just want our own pleasure. We want to take pleasure for ourselves. But the thing is that God actually gave you a sex drive, and that's a good thing. He gave you that sex drive so that it would drive you to another person, it would drive you to a woman, so that in that marriage, you guys get to reflect Christ in the church. And that is an awesome, fun thing. And like, you are totally going to fail along the way. Your future wife's probably failing along the way too. But the gospel is sufficient for that. The blood of the cross is sufficient for all the ways that you're going to fail. You just keep pressing forward toward the wholeness, toward the goodness, toward the gospel and the grace, and appreciate your sex drive and like see it as a good thing. Like, it is a good thing, but it is meant to drive you to another, not to drive you to a screen to please yourself. So yeah, trying to have those conversations and, as much as possible, trying to have them before they're like in the midst of this very addictive, habit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I hear, and one of the things that I think I hear you saying in there is, I love the idea that you say, hey, listen, every moment is an opportunity for the gospel. How would you also maybe help parents reframe failure as not just opportunities for the gospel, but also opportunities to learn? Because that's a little bit of what I'm hearing in that too, is it's because I think a lot of parents come at it as like they've got a particular outcome that they have in mind. And if, little Johnny doesn't basically come out of their family looking like a rose, I mean, all is lost. There's almost like this fatalistic view towards the stumbling journey of life. What encouragement would you give to the mom out there that maybe is feeling that hyperventilation of like, I have a vision for my kids, and if it doesn't get met, the sky is falling, everything's,
Oh
lost.
man. I mean, not to be callous, but like, give it up, girl. It's not going to do the kids any favors. It's not going to do you any It's not, and I mean, the thing is that it's just not scriptural. Like, that view, that hope is not a scriptural view of who we are as sinners. Like, we are dead in our trespasses, like, apart from Christ, there is no good in us. And, so the changing the outcome that you're going for rather than the rose or however you put it, hoping for an outcome of being like, when he sins, he's going to know exactly who to go with that. He is not going to be afraid of coming to God with his own sin, because he's going to, he's going to know those arms are open. He's going to know that blood is sufficient. So Yeah, I think that's something that I feel like I harp on a lot is, again, that my goal as a mom isn't to make perfectly like well-behaved kids or perfectly sexually pure children. Like, it's to make sure that when they leave my home, they have the humility and the knowledge to know where to go with their brokenness.
What are
Did
some
that
other
answer the
obstacles?
question?
Yeah, no, that was good. What are some other obstacles that you see facing moms and parents around this whole topic of sexuality with their kids?
Um, oh man, I don't know. There's quite a few. I mean, a lot of it is, sometimes the two parents have different ideas of how and when and should we even talk to our kids about it. There's a lot going on, of course, in the culture that is. I think that it's almost like making us afraid to talk about it because, or at least I've experienced that. Like, I kind of want to avoid the topic because I don't want anyone to misunderstand me and then twist it into something that is like hateful, or like bigoted or something. Like,
Hmm.
it's becoming so it's becoming sometimes it's at the point where even just saying like that I believe God created sex to be in a marriage between a man and a woman, like that's a pretty offensive thing to say in our culture right now. And so I think it can discourage a lot of parents from saying it to their kids because then, they go and say it to a friend or they go and talk about it at school and like they might get in trouble for that, like real
Hmm.
trouble. And that's an interesting place for us to find ourselves.
Yeah. Well, we've got just a few minutes left, but I want to just ask if there's just any other tips or words of encouragement that you want to give to the moms out there that are, navigating different seasons with their kids and trying to, again, raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, but do that specifically around the topic of sex. And then also share with us any resources or anywhere that moms can get more information about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm, repeating myself, but really, like, that really is my heart, though, is that the gospel belongs everywhere. Like, the bitterness in your own heart, the resentment towards your husband, the anger you're, yelling at your kids, or the shame that you're feeling at night, or your past sexual brokenness, your current sexual brokenness, which might include, like, never wanting to have sex with your husband. Like, I mean, everywhere. Like, the gospel belongs everywhere. And because of what he has done for us, we actually have the opportunity to just joyfully grow with him and with each other. It doesn't have to be drudgery. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't even always have to be hard. It can be fun and it can be like a moment for connection and vulnerability and growth together. That's kind of the heart of my ministry is a group community coaching program where my clients and I like we dig into all of this stuff together. Yeah, so if you want to find out more, I have a website, badchristianmoms.com, and then my free Facebook group. I do some free trainings in there. Taming Mommy's Temper Boot Camp is our like signature event. And so you can join the free Facebook group and start to get to know us. And then we have two client groups, a membership group, and then the more intensive year-long program. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we will be sure to put all that in our show notes. And Sarah, this has been a great conversation. And don't ever feel bad about feeling like you're on a loop with talking about the gospel. I think that's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be something that's constantly dripped into our lives. In fact, one of the things that I say to myself in the mirror every morning, and I'm telling it to guys all the time, is like, you have to preach the gospel to yourself every day. I mean, we don't ever
Yes.
get away from it. It's like it is the foundation of our transformation. And so I want to encourage
Yes.
you keep beating that drum. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and to step into this space and do what you're doing to help moms.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, folks, check out the show notes. We're going to put that info in there about her website, and of course, if you need help just navigating whatever season you're in, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to connect with you And we look forward to seeing you back here again next time on the Pure Sex Radio program. Take care.